Hey again, continuing our discussions about different tensions and crossing cultures. And this lecture is going to be at the tensions about preparation for crises, and it's the crisis versus non-crisis views as it relates to preparation and response to crises events. Now, once again, like everything else, this is not just a yes-no question. This is not a question of where one group is a crisis focus and one group is a non-crisis focus, and that it's either a yes-no question. There is a continuum, and you'll see that over and over again, that there's a continuum in each and every one of these comparisons. However, there are groups that tend toward being either more crisis focused or being more non-crisis focused. For example, this is another one of those where the USA and Northern Europe, especially the USA, is incredibly close to one end of the spectrum here. The United States of America is a highly crisis-oriented and crisis preparation-oriented culture. On the other end of the crisis orientation would be the island of Yap and the other islands of the tropics, and also parts of South America, Africa, places like that. More the southern parts of the world are the parts of the world that are nearer those type of places tend to be very non-crisis oriented. And then you have a lot of places like Russia, the Far East, where I was working in Latvia, that are just somewhere out in the middle. They are kind of crisis focused, kind of non-crisis focused. And so once again, there's a continuum. And even within this continuum, there are people in the U.S. who are very, very crisis-oriented and some that are less crisis-oriented. However, the least crisis-oriented person in the U.S. is much more crisis-oriented than somebody in the tropics. And the most crisis-oriented person in the tropic is much less crisis-oriented than anybody in the U.S. So basically, you can see how this continuum works, and it's kind of interesting to see how this works. Now, you'll understand it better as we dig in to what is the concepts of what is the right way of dealing and preparing for crisis. All right. Now, understand again, if you are a person who grew up in what I would call typical U.S. culture, you're going to be a person who has a crisis orientation. You don't realize that yet, but once I describe it to you, you'll understand what it means. Crisis orientation basically says prevention is better than dealing with potential disaster. Prevention is better than dealing with potential disaster. We have a lot of our sayings, and these are old sayings that you may or may not be familiar with. They were still familiar in my younger years, but they've kind of fallen from use in the past 20 to 30 years. But one of the classic sayings that people always used to say is, "A stitch in time saves nine." Now, you may have heard that saying, and you may have not know exactly what it meant when you heard it. Well, that's what it means is, if you've got a garment, and I've got a little thing here I can show you, and one of the stitches comes loose right here on this thing, if you immediately notice that that's coming loose and you put one stitch there, it'll hold it together. If you don't respond to it immediately, if you let it stay coming apart, all of a sudden this whole part will pull apart. And you've seen that happen before on a shirt or on something like this. All of a sudden it comes loose and the whole thing comes loose. Well, then you have to do a bunch of stitches to repair it. And so a stitch in time save nine means if you see a problem, fix the problem now. Don't let the problem get worse. We have another old saying, an ounce of prevention is equal to a pound of cure. In other words, it is much easier to keep something from happening than it is to let it happen and then have to try to fix it after it's happened. It's better to exert a small amount of effort preventing something from happening rather than the bigger cost of allowing it to happen and trying to fix it once it's done. So a crisis orientation tends to be pessimistic. crisis-oriented people tend to expect something to happen. They tend to expect that negative things will happen in life, and we feel that we should to do everything we can to prevent these things from happening. However, a non-crisis orientation, and once again, I need to explain to you, a majority of people outside the U.S. have some degree of a non-crisis orientation, okay? Our little group of 300 million people plus a couple of 100 million people in Europe, about 500 or 600 million people on the planet have a crisis orientation. Billions of people on the planet have a non-crisis orientation. So understand, you may not realize it, but you're in the minority on this one. So remember, the non-crisis orientation says, remember, most things work themselves out if given time. In other words, why bother preventing something? Why bother worrying about something? If you just leave it alone, most things take care of themselves. I mean, sure, we can do all this work and prevention and all this effort to being put forward, but, you know, really, why worry about all of that? And the next thing, think of all the things you worried about that didn't happen. I mean, think of all the times that you have spent a lot of effort and made all these preparations and all these concerns and all these things happened, and nothing actually happened. Why? Think about that. A non-crisis orientation tends to say, let's just wait and see what happens. Let's just wait and see if maybe good things will happen instead of bad things. And so a non-crisis orientation tends to be more optimistic. They tend to have a view that is, well, more often than not, bad things don't happen. So since more often than not, bad things don't happen, let's just wait and see what happens. Looking again, comparing these two. A crisis orientation. Crisis orientation anticipates crisis. Man, we have whole departments called crisis management departments. We have a preparedness plan for everything. I mean, think about the things that you've done or that you've been told you should do as you've been growing up. I remember that we would, and because we lived in an area that is prone to have tornadoes, we would have tornado drills in our school. And in a tornado drill, when the alarm sounded a certain way, we would all get up from our desks and go out into a hallway that is away from a glass window, that's a good supported part of the structure, and we all got down on our knees and we would cover our heads like this right here, and you know, it was a tornado drill. It was so that in case a tornado happened, we would all be able to do something that would increase our opportunity of not being harmed and not being killed. We anticipate that crisis. We have fire drills at the dormitories here at the school every semester, at least once a semester. I think it's actually twice or three times. I can't remember what it is, but they have a fire drill. And the fire drill is they sound the alarm at a certain time when people are there in their dorm rooms, and they make sure everybody knows the procedures of how to get out of their room, how to get out of the down the stairs, which exit to take. We want to make sure that everybody gets out of the building within a certain amount of time. So we have this fire drill because we're anticipating a possible crisis. Now, here's the deal. We had, when I was going to school, I don't know, two or three tornado drills a year. We had exactly 0 tornadoes hit our school. Matter of fact, there were 0 tornadoes that hit any school in my town. There were 0 tornadoes that hit any school in the 5 towns around us. There were 0 tornadoes that hit any school within 100 miles of us. Now, however, well, there was a tornado that hit a school in a town called Wichita Falls, which is about 2 hours away. And that proved, look, see, tornadoes can hit schools. Now, the fact that out of the 50,000 schools in Texas, one school got hit by a tornado one time, it means it's statistically meaningless, technically. But we're crisis-oriented. We got 5 dormitories on this campus right now. We have 3 fire drills a semester. So far, we've had 0 fires in our dorms. We've had 0 fires in our dorms for the past 20 years, the past 50 years, the past 60 years. Now, here's the deal, though. In 1955, we had a dormitory catch on fire. And it was a dormitory, and that dormitory burned all the way to the ground, and we had to rebuild this building, which I'm actually sitting in the building they rebuilt on the place. But understand, in 1955, we had a fire. Haven't had one since then. There haven't been any fires in dormitories in any other college around here. Hasn't been any fires in any dormitories 100 miles around. Now, there has been fires in dormitories, though, because, now understand, though, that is statistically meaningless, that there was a fire once in a dormitory, because the chances of there being a fire in a dormitory are not real high, especially one that actually burns one to the ground. We have too many things in place for it. But once again, as a crisis orientation, we anticipate that there will be crisis, and we plan for it. Another thing that illustrates our tendency to anticipate crisis is we are insurance crazy. We have insurance for everything. We have home insurance, homeowners insurance. We have renters insurance. If you are not a person who lives in a home, you can get renters insurance. We have car insurance. As a matter of fact, we are required by law to have car insurance on our car. We have health insurance, dental insurance. Some people have, visual insurance for like glasses. There are literally insurances for people. People get insurances on their pets. People get insurance on particular pieces of jewelry. There are football players who have their legs insured so that if they get hurt, the insurance policy will pay off in case they lose money in a career they would have had because they got their legs hurt. We insure everything. And understand, since you may have grown up here, you may think that is the way that all things are. But understand, I lived in Latvia for 15 years. We were required to have an insurance policy on our car, and it cost us about $50 a year to have insurance on our car. The only thing it paid for is if we got hit by somebody and it destroyed our car. That's the only thing it paid. It paid nothing else. Didn't pay little dents, didn't pay scratches, didn't pay if I ran into something else. And we had no home insurance. We had we had health insurance, but only because we were Americans. The health insurance was something we got because we served an American organization. People didn't have insurance. They didn't have insurance on this, that, and everything. And so in a crisis orientation, we anticipate crisis and we plan for crisis. As a matter of fact, we emphasize planning. And as a matter of fact, we look down on people who don't plan well. And that's a way you can really tell if you're crisis oriented or not. When you hear about a flood that takes place somewhere, and you find out that a group of people, their houses were flooded, and you find out that, first of all, the city didn't really plan well. They had this thing set up so that this flood could happen. They didn't plan well. And then you find out, well, these people didn't have insurance. You go, why didn't you have insurance? You lived in a floodplain. What's wrong with you? Okay, you see, we emphasize planning to the point that if you don't plan, we think there's something wrong with you. Some of the other things about a crisis orientation, we seek a quick solution. We want things fixed, and we want them fixed now. We want to plan, and we want to plan now. When it's time to deal with something, we repeatedly follow an authoritative pre-planned procedure. And like I said, we have drills, we have practices. I watched a video one time that talked about the fact that that families should have fire drills in their home, so that everybody in the home knows how to get out in case of a drill. I mean, we plan, and once something happens, we are expected to follow this scheduled, pre-planned procedure exactly to the letter. So we're crisis-oriented. And we tend to seek out the advice of experts. We want to see what experts have to say about things, and we want to follow this expert advice because we're pretty sure that's the best thing we could possibly do. Non-crisis orientation, they downplay the possibility of a crisis. Now, I told you, here's the thing, I've already mentioned to you, that we plan for things that are statistically nearly impossible to happen. We plan for a tornado to hit our school. There are tornadoes, and tornadoes do hit buildings. But the likelihood of a tornado hitting your school or my school is, I don't know, 1 in a quadrillion or something. I mean, it's just so tiny. Even if a tornado hits your town, the likelihood of it hitting your school is really, really tiny. But it could happen, so we plan for it. Non-crisis orientation said, no, there's only a few tornadoes each year, and only a few tornadoes get near our town, and never been a tornado hit our school, so why bother planning for it? Why are you wasting all this time and energy planning for something that is most likely never going to happen? Okay? Non-crisis focuses on actual experiences, not on potential possible negative experiences. Non-crisis orientation avoids taking action. They won't do something until they know for certain that something negative is going to happen. They will not spend a lot of energy and a lot of effort to do something until they're certain that negative things are about to happen. They delay their decision process. They seek ad hoc solutions. Ad hoc is at the moment or for the moment. In other words, a specific solution to a specific situation. They don't have this long chart on the wall of, in case of fire, step 1, step 2, step 3, step, they don't have that. And therefore, when something happens, they go, okay, how should we fix this? Let's do this. All right, let's do that. And they tend to distrust expert advice. They think that the experts spend too much time sitting around worrying about whether a crisis might happen or not. And so there is a tendency to ignore or distrust expert advice. The illustration that is in the Lingenfelter textbook, and I believe it's in the book that you use in this class, but he provides an excellent illustration of this. The island of Yap, out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's a dot so small it's hard to find. About 10 times a year, there is a typhoon, which is the version, that's what they call a hurricane. The hurricane spins one way, a typhoon spins the other, but there about 10 times a year there is a typhoon that shows that it might hit the island of Yap. Now here's the deal. About once a year, one of those 10 typhoons actually hits Yap. Now on the island of Yap there is also some sort of military installation. It's either on the island of Yap or an island nearby. And there's actually a military installation that is run by Americans or Europeans or people who are crisis-oriented. Every time that there is a typhoon warning given, every time there is this hurricane warning given, they go through their step procedures. They go out and they tie down all of the airplanes. They seal up all of the windows. They make sure that all of the places that could be flooded, that the floodgates have been sealed or floodgates have been opened or whatever they need to do. And they go through this 27-step procedure every time that there is a potential that a hurricane might hit them. The people of Yap, they say, well, 10 times a year we hear about these hurricanes. They only hit maybe once a year. Why should I make all of this effort to get ready every time? And Lingenfeld tells the story about there was one of the times that there was a hurricane that was on the way, and they had 3 days warning. Well, of course, as soon as they had the 3 days warning, the European American group out there started battening down the hatches, getting everything ready. The people of Yap said, oh, that's interesting. Okay, well. And they went back to doing what they normally do, which is chewing betel nut and standing around and working a little bit and having conversations and stuff like that. The second day, the American and European institution out there got into battle mode. They were already getting people put in the right positions to fight off any flooding. They were making sandbags to protect particular areas. The people of Yap said, yeah, it does kind of look dark off to the south there. How interesting. Okay, yeah. The day before the hurricane, of course, the European Americans, they're all locked down and they're all sealed up now, waiting for the hurricane to hit. The people of Yap are going, this one may hit us. How interesting. I mean, of course, it could still divert away. I mean, we've had them come this close before, and they just make a little turn and they miss us. The hurricane hits the island. The people of Yap go, oh, this one's hitting us. And the funny story that he tells is about a guy who basically is a woodworker, and he works right down on the beach, and he has his big saw set up right down on the beach because the trees are nearby, and it's easier to get water for different things, and so he always keeps his big huge saw unit right down on the beach. And 3 days before the hurricane, he kept working, and 2 days before the hurricane, he kept working, and 1 day before the hurricane, he kept working. And Lingenfelter asked him several times, you want some help getting that in? The hurricane's coming. Probably not going to hit us. Oh, probably not going to hit us. Oh, probably not going to hit us. Literally, the hurricane is hit. The waves are crashing on the shore. They're swamping up to where his saw is. And somebody runs by and says, hey, we need to go help him get his saw. And so they're wading out into water, knee-deep, almost to waist-deep, trying to drag this saw back up onto higher ground while the hurricane is going on. Okay. Now, me as a crisis-oriented person says that was stupid. He could have lost his saw. It could have washed out to sea. He'd have lost his livelihood. Why did he do that? He, as a non-crisis person, said, I could waste 3 days of work every time a hurricane is headed this way, and only once in a while does it ever. Why should I waste all that time and effort for something that may never happen? All right, so here's the deal you have to understand. Crisis orientation, not good, not bad. Non-crisis orientation, not good, not bad. Different. If you leave the United States of America, or if you work with people who are not from the United States of America or from Northern Europe, you are going to be working with people who are not crisis-oriented. They are non-crisis-oriented. Get used to it. It will drive you crazy, but get used to it. Be aware of the fact that they have every reason in the world not to worry about things that aren't going to happen, or that usually aren't going to happen. As a matter of fact, this is another one of those where I wonder about our crisis orientation and how it affects our faith. You look through the scriptures and you can say, over and over again, Jesus talked about, do not worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will have enough worries of its own. James talked about the fact that we shouldn't make plans saying, tomorrow I will do this or that, or next week I will go here or go there. We should say, if the Lord wills it, I will go here and go there, or do this and do that. We, in our crisis-focused, time-focused culture, have created for ourselves worries and concerns about things that are probably never going to happen. I have been paying homeowner's insurance on my house for 10 years. I don't know how much money that equals, but it's not a lot amount of money. I have had absolutely zero problems in my house. I've been paying car insurance for most of my adult life. Tens of thousands of dollars I've spent on car insurance. I had a wreck when I was 16. I had a wreck when I was 17. I now have not had a wreck in 38 years, and I'm still paying car insurance, because I am sure that tomorrow is the day that there's going to be a wreck, and tomorrow I'm going to be happy that I've paid for all this. Well, that's how our brains think, but is it really? And I'm not telling you to get rid of your insurance, okay? I'm not saying, because our culture honors that. Our culture honors planning, and if you don't plan, you're dishonored within our culture. But do understand that there's a different way of thinking. There's a different way of living, and that people in non-crisis cultures, they don't live with as much stress as we live with. And I think that Christians in non-crisis cultures have a better understanding of the scriptures that talk about not worrying and about casting your cares on the Lord and things. And so I think there's some things we could learn from people in a non-crisis culture. But we'll wrap up there, and next time we get together, we'll be talking about the tensions about accomplishing goals, task orientation versus people orientation. Talk to you soon.